ball rolling here, huh?
No, no.
I'd like to call to order the Port of Bellingham Commission meeting, January 4th, 2022, and close the executive session and open the regular meeting. First order of business, we'll take roll call. Commissioner Bell.
Present.
Commissioner Shepard.
Here.
Very good, thank you. Before we move on, I'd like to mention the passing of a good friend to the port. Whether he hindered you or helped you, he was a good man all around. I'd like to take a moment for Senator Doug Erickson. To Doug's family, our condolences, and thanks for helping us out when you did, Doug. Okay, moving on to the advisory meeting schedule. Well, I guess public comment first. I don't want to miss that one, huh? Better do that first. We'll do public comment first. Do we have speakers?
Bobby, can you hear me? Commissioner Briscoe, rather, this is Jim.
Okay, Jim, we're going to let Doug is here in person. He's going to speak first, and then we'll take you. I'm having trouble seeing you on my screen. I don't see you.
Oh, great. Thank you. I'll come back.
Okay, Doug, go ahead if you would, please.
Yeah, anyway, good afternoon, commissioners. It's a different place to be now that with COVID and stuff like that. It's interesting to see how you've really embraced technology to kind of keep people involved in the port. And I'd like to pass on a compliment for that, because that's not easy. And for the old guys, it's really not easy. So I'm glad to see that go on. What I want to speak about this afternoon is you've got something on your agenda, which is basically what would be the kind of encroachment of residential into port operations or port facilities in Blaine. And hopefully I've got all this right. But there is a constant battle, especially when real estate prices are high, for people to come to ports. Believe it or not, if you Google ports and hotels and ports and condos, it's not just here in Bellingham, it's not just here in Washington State, it's just not in the United States. It's throughout the world. Everybody loves to turn port properties into residential properties because it is worth a lot of money to the people who develop those properties, but at whose expense? And the expense is to the greater regional population. And I would like to encourage you to keep that in mind. It's not that residential can't coexist with port properties, but you have to be extraordinarily careful. The second thing is that when you go out into a long-term planning process and you bring in the whole community to that planning process, if you, as port commissioners, within months make exceptions to what all that planning process is, you encourage people to not be involved in that planning process at all. They're doing part of the work for you in bringing all the stakeholders together for long-term planning. So in Blaine, we have one property developer who would like to add residential. They will, in every case, wherever you go in the world, they will always tell you about the benefits to the local economy. But I think the honest answer is that the benefits really accrue to the individual property owner, and it's a lot of money. And that's what they want. That's the motivation. If you allow me to do this, I will make a lot more money with my property. What you have to keep in mind, though, is that the region benefits from ports. And I'll give you a couple of interesting examples. If the Port of Bellingham decided to rent out all of their property, all of it, to condominiums and that kind of thing, it would, are you still a port? And that's a fundamental issue that you got to kind of struggle with. Ports are a very special thing. It's a very small amount of land that has incredible value. All of the wealthy cities in the world are ports. And it's not an accident. Wars have been fought over ports. This is something that's been going on for 1,000 years all over the world. And every real estate developer, every small property owner would like to convert that land to residential so that they can pocket a windfall profit. And it's very hard sometimes to understand that. It's also sometimes very hard to resist that pressure. But I want you to all think about it before you get involved with it. There was a 2-year planning process in Blaine. I would really like you to respect that planning process so that when somebody comes forward and says, hey, I'd like to change my property so I could make a lot of money, that's really the bottom line. That you say, I tell you what, where were you during the planning process? And please don't bring these things that are personal windfalls to the Port Commission without showing clear public benefit, because I think that one of the things that happens is that it will keep your inbox full of these kinds of requests. And so I would like to see you tell these folks, go back to the broader community and make your case in Blaine. And if you can't do that, then that's the way it goes. But I'd like you to protect that little bit of land that is the Port of Bellingham for commerce. There are 3 different major trends going on. We don't know where they're going to end up. 10-year plans, projecting the future is a very difficult thing. But I can tell you a couple of trends that are already ongoing that are very important. One, people are taking a hard look at moving freight by water between the cities in the state of Washington and et cetera. And this is not a small thing. This is driven by climate change. This is one of the partial solutions to climate change is to use less petroleum to move freight. And I can tell you right now, it's about 1/10 the amount of diesel to move freight by water versus truck. I don't know where it's going to end up. I'm not going to sit here and project what it's going to be 10 years from now. And I don't know where Blaine's going to be in that process. But I do know from personal experience that people who live in residences and harbors tend to look at the water view that they think they have purchased in a view towards the whole view, even though their land boundaries are very limited, and they tend to look out and say, I don't think those people should be working at 11 o'clock at night or making noise at 11 o'clock at night. And what we end up with is quite often wealthy residence owners dictating policies at ports that prevent working people from getting their job done. And so I would encourage you to tell these folks that want to change to residences in Blaine, I would encourage you to tell them to please take it back to the planning folks that spent 2 years coming up with a long-term plan in Blaine And I would like you to tell them to take your case to them and then bring it to this commission. And the reason why is if you don't do it that way, it's disrespectful to the people that put in all the effort for long-term planning already in Blaine. And I think that that will keep your inbox reasonable. And I think, which I think is important. Good policies, you want to, if you got a bad policy, change the policy. But if you have a good policy, try to push it forward so that it keeps your inbox from every Tom, Dick, and Harry wanting a change in the value of their land, basically, so that they can grab a windfall. So that's my comments. Thank you very much for the time.
Doug, could you please state your name and your address?
Oh, I
forgot to say.
apologize. My name is Doug Carlberg. I live in Bellingham.
Right, very good. Thank you, Doug. Appreciate your comment and your time. I think we have Jim. Is he online waiting? Or?
Yeah, he's the J you're seeing on your screen.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, John Isle, Government Relations Chair for the Working Waterfront Coalition. And we have some comments about action item number 2, the proposed modification of Point Roberts Press's harbor lease in Blaine Harbor. I'd like to say at the outset, I really appreciate Doug's comments, and we have identical goals with a little bit different spin on this particular project. But Doug is right on the money on his sketch of the broader playfield here. But from our perspective, I'd like to give you some history first. The coalition has opposed gentrification of our harbor areas from the beginning, and this remains our default position. In fact, during the task force process, we floated the idea of a policy for the comprehensive scheme that would take residential use completely off the table for both our harbor areas. There was pushback from the staff, so that idea did not reach the commission level. When Mr. Smith first asked us about adding residential units to the Point Roberts Press building, we opposed it as a foot in the door for gentrification. Time marches on, and as details emerged, this project began to look like it deserved a second look. The potential buyer's configuration includes additional mixed-use capacity available to maritime companies, a ground floor local service cafe that might recall the glory days of the Harbor Cafe, and only two additional residential units to make a total of 3. This plan does have the potential to add vitality to Blaine's working waterfront with minimal negative impacts. Another part of the appeal of this proposal is what it might prevent. The port has wanted this property built out for a long time. If nothing changes now, a future commission could approve a residential build out that includes 9 condominiums, and that would be gentrification on steroids. Is there a downside to this proposal? Definitely, and that's basically what Doug has addressed so articulately. There is a downside, and this is a serious concern. It could serve as a precedent that increases gentrification pressure on other harbor properties. But keep in mind that with the exception of the Camway building next door, all Blaine Harbor land is now protected by the highest bar against gentrification, and that's the water reliance status in the comprehensive scheme. In addition, there is a straightforward way to stop other dominoes from falling. Simply add a policy to the comprehensive scheme that would prevent residential additions on all port land in both Squalicum and Blaine Harbor planning areas. You should have received a memo from us about this possibility, but it's not on today's agenda. Returning to the action item and the lease draft, reading through the hold harmless clauses confirms that the port now prioritizes sustaining vibrant working waterfronts. And that is why we are confident you will give this lease modification careful consideration, make the tough call, and a wise decision, which we will support no matter which way it goes. And thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate that. Any questions, Ken? Michael? Any questions? Okay. Thank you, Jim. We have anybody else?
Yes, pardon me, I would like to speak. For the record, this is Pat Grubb. My wife and I own the Northern Light Building at 225 Marine Drive in Blaine. We'd like to express our sincere appreciation to the Port of Bellingham Real Estate Division staff who prepared the modification of the land lease governing the use of premises for the Northern Light Building. Although it is restricted to the extent that live-work use is limited to 30% of the building, it is sufficient to allow for the construction of the second phase of the building and ensure its economic viability. From the port's perspective, it also establishes a precedent that any live-work uses in Blaine Harbor will be extremely limited and eliminates concerns about any possible gentrification in the future. The Northern Light and the Camway building next door are the only properties not subject to the water-dependent use restrictions that were approved by the Commission in November after considerable public input. As the Camway building is solely used for its growing truck and logistics business, I'm not sure how necessary the precedent is, but it will now exist nonetheless. We believe that the staff has presented a fair and successful working Blaine waterfront while allowing the property owner the flexibility to provide the amenities such as a restaurant that will help the port achieve its goal. Without this modification, we do not believe a full build out would ever occur and the property would never achieve its fullest potential. Otherwise, it is likely that the building would languish for years. We'd like to thank staff for their fair and thoughtful consideration and for commissioners for putting this on their agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. I appreciate that. Do we have anybody else for public testimony?
I don't see anyone else. Anyone else for public testimony? Looks like no.
Okay, that being said, we'll move on. I'll read the advisory meetings. If I can read it. Buy some glasses. We have the Marine Advisory Committee, the MAC meeting, January 11th at 6 p.m. I'm not exactly, I think it's going to be here in the commission chambers. It doesn't say, but
Usually in this room.
okay.
The MAC meetings for 2021 are all going to be Zoom this year.
2022.
2022.
Okay.
sorry.
So that's again at January 11th at 6 p.m. here in the Harbor Conference Center in the commission.
Apparently they're on Zoom for now.
Oh, it's just Zoom?
Zoom only for 2022.
Okay.
We're not committing the whole year on that. This next meeting will be on Zoom, and then staff will discuss whether the rest will be in person.
Is that the same with the BIAC then as well?
Tiffany just told me about that.
Okay. The Bellingham International Airport Advisory Committee BIAC will be January 13th at 4 p.m.
Sunil, can you clarify, is that going to be Zoom as well?
Commissioner, that's correct. The meetings at the airport fire station at this time are restricted, so we'll be doing them by Zoom.
Very good. Both those meetings will be by Zoom. And I guess we'll move to the consent agenda. Carrie, if you please.
Sure. Motion to approve consent agenda items A through M.
Commissioner Bell.
I have no question.
Commissioner Shepard.
I have a couple questions. First for Kay, and I just wanted to get an update from Don or John on the status of that loan account and any comments that we've been hearing about the sufficiency of funds, or do we have more demand than we have availability?
Looks like John is
Commissioner
on
John
here.
Mitchner, Economic Development, Port of Bellingham. We actually have two funds now, which is great news. We have the Legacy Fund that's been in existence since 1984. Currently, we have 4 loans outstanding with that fund that are all current and paying as promised. We have about $160,000 in that fund that is ready to be lent out. A unique piece to that particular fund is it was started in the mid 80s, and we have shown enough good administration to it, I should say, that the EDA actually asked us last year to defederalize that fund. And we're working through that process now. And really all that means is that it just is going to lessen the paperwork burden on ourselves and the ADA reporting on those funds. Other than that, it will still be used for the same purposes as it always has and be lent out to the small business community here in the county. With COVID coming on in 2020, the spring of 2020, we were again approached by the EDA to submit paperwork for a grant for a CARES Act RLF fund, which we did go ahead and do. The original disbursement there was $500,000, of which we needed to get $125,000 lent by November of this year. And unfortunately, we were not able to achieve that simply because there was so much grant money being distributed over the last couple of years. And in addition, the state of Washington has now gotten into the small business lending program with some CARES Act dollars of theirs. So we do actually have a loan client that's on the agenda today. That they got us the loan application about a week too late to meet the deadline of the EDA. So the EDA did take back some money, but we still have $325,000 in that fund to loan out. With this particular credit request, it'll be down to $250,000. So we're looking good in that regard to monies to spend. And the hope is as COVID restrictions, fingers crossed, start residing and going away, that we'll be able to get back out into the community and get more of these funds out there working where we want them to be.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Just out of curiosity, how do people know about this fund? I'm sure it's on our website, but how else do people get connected to you and this opportunity?
Commissioner, that's a really great question. It's been one of sort of the difficult things about the fund. Again, I'm going to speak to the legacy fund since this new CARES Act fund is literally brand new. The loan today is the first one from that program. But since the mid 80s, there's been 33 loans done. So it's a little less than one a year. And the problem being that the total capitalization of that fund in the beginning was $400,000. There was a couple of write-offs that occurred quite some time ago. So the amount of money in the fund, as we've talked about before, is sort of low. You do 2 or 3 loans, it's loaned out. You don't want to advertise the program there because it's sort of false advertising. So it sort of goes in these peaks and valleys of promoting it. The good news is we have a great relationship with our local community lenders. And 3 of them actually are on the loan committee themselves. And I stay in touch with those folks quite often and interface with them about any clients that they might not feel are quite bankable, because that's what this program is about. We're going to bank more high-risk borrowers with the goal of job creation. And we have managed to create and retain over 230 jobs thus far in the program. So that's been successful, but it's been one of the challenges. The hope going forward is with the second fund online now, we're not going to necessarily be loaned out, if you will, and we can do a more concerted effort to pushing the information out there and letting folks know that what we have.
Great. I love the program. Glad to hear the update. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Commissioner Bell.
Any other questions on that one? I had a question on L as well.
Maybe you had a question on it. Okay. Go ahead, Commissioner Shepard.
Okay. I just read through this and I was uncertain about how we are able to provide a 1 month reduction in payment or opportunity for no payment with our restrictions on gifting of public funds. And I really understand that the recent flooding has severely impacted this business, and I want to do what we can to help them, but I'm just unclear on how we're able to provide that assistance with our limitations.
Excellent question, Commissioners. Terry Lahi, property manager. What we can do is, the one thing that we cannot waive is leasehold excise tax, because that goes straight to the state. However, the Commission can set rates for property, I believe, at any value, a fair value that they deem appropriate. So in this case, for 1 month, for other tenants who are moving into properties, we do allow them a 1 month, 2 month, up to 3 months sometimes, a tenant improvement allowance Again, we collected the leasehold tax, which goes straight to the state, but those kind of things we are allowed to do.
Commissioner, I'll just add to that. The tenant is also providing a release of claims against the port for these repairs. Keep in mind, this is our building. Our building sustains a lot of damage in the storms, and the tenant is going to be taking on those repairs for us and releasing us from those claims.
Commissioner, that's helpful.
This is Holly Stafford from legal. Just to echo, in more legalese terms, what Rob and Sneal are saying is that release and waiver of all claims is the consideration that allows the port to provide that rent reduction. So it's not a gifting issue because the port is receiving value in return.
Okay. That was the piece I was missing. And I know it's we get a lot of these requests, and we were able to meet some of them in the special circumstances of COVID. And I want to do the best we can anytime for our tenants, as long as we are following the law to the letter. So thank you for that. That's all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Shepherd. No questions? Okay. Carrie, if you please.
Motion to approve consent agenda items A through M.
Commissioner Bell?
Yes.
Commissioner Shepherd?
Yes.
Commissioner Briscoe's a yes as well. Okay, with that done, we'll move on to our presentations. I believe Mr. Mike Hogan is up, actually twice, so.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Michael Hogan, Public Affairs Administrator.
Where's
Well, Happy New Year. As we go through and work on all the issues we do at the port, we spent the past several months working on perhaps our most important document, which is the strategic budget. And it contains a lot of really good information about port operations and activities. However, it's 165 pages. It's a pretty meaty document. And so Tamara Sobczak, the port's CFO, came to me a few weeks ago and showed me some examples of more of a Reader's Digest version of, how could we distill this down into some key message points. And Tamara's idea was terrific. I always enjoy going through the budget and when I have questions about some of the different port activities and operations, it's a great place to go. So we did that and just wanted to present, kind of walk through that brochure, and then of course it'll be up on our website. We have some brochures that we can hand out, and as we move through the year, and then it's meant to be something that we can update easily moving into future years, and adjust as we move through changing priorities. So it starts off with just a real, and I know you can't see this well, again, it'll be up on our website, but just a map of the key port transportation terminals throughout the county. Of course, the budget, we always start out with an overview of the economy in Whatcom County. And one thing that really jumps out over the pandemic is just how the impacts of the border restrictions with the US and Canada have impacted not only the United States, but Whatcom County. Pre-pandemic, 400,000 people cross the US-Canada border every day, generating $2 billion in goods and services. So it's really important for our economy and for moving people, of course. Everybody's concerned about public health. With the recent Omicron virus coming up in South Africa, I was listening to some discussion about public health experts, and they immediately restricted travel to South Africa. And it was interesting that they said, by the time those restrictions went into place, it doesn't really work. The genie was out of the bottle. It was already in the US and other places. What really works is vaccinations, masking, and social distancing. And I think we also see that with the US-Canada border where, you put restrictions in place, and rightly so because you're concerned, but we really need to follow the guidance of the public health experts and really understand what the impacts to our economy are. In Whatcom County, we see huge impacts to tourism, to retail, to to business expansion. At Bellingham International Airport alone, we see $330 million less of annual economic benefit. Point Roberts, of course, their economies have been devastated. And so as we are responsible for Whatcom County's economy, I think as we discuss that with our policymakers and with other folks, we just need to make them understand how important the border is, and that we have, responsible border policy when we look at the U.S.-Canada land border. Moving into the strategic priorities of the Port of Bellingham. Of course, Bellingham International Airport's a huge priority. Landing Southwest last year was a big deal. That'll be really important for our economic recovery. Of course, as we're still going through the global pandemic, managing costs, getting grants, and looking for a reasonable border policy will be huge moving forward as we continue to recruit airlines and support an expansion of service. Luckily, we have one of the best airport directors in the business with Sunil Harman, and him and his staff do a terrific job. So good things to come in 2022. The port's core mission is economic development and job creation. This picture shows the groundbreaking for an electric bus company, Vicinity Motors Corporations in Ferndale last year. Port staff, under the leadership Don Goldberg, secured a $300,000 grant to bring this new manufacturing facility from Canada to Ferndale, and they plan to invest $22 million in Whatcom County and create 20 living jobs. So just one example of the many things that the importance the port has in the Whatcom County's economy and creating jobs. Another strategic priority is employee retention. There's huge problems throughout the state and nation with keeping employees and the right employees, and so we have a terrific staff here at the port, and we want to make sure people understand this is a great place to work, and that we have the right people to do these good things for Whatcom County. We talk a lot about redeveloping the shipping terminal and the log pond. Tremendous opportunity. This is the port's biggest potential job creating asset. The picture here shows the 120 metric ton mobile harbor crane we purchased last year. We also received a $6.8 million federal grant for dredging and dock work. So as we continue to work to modernize the terminal for the needs of the shipping industry, of course, there are challenges: the cost of in-water work, permitting, navigation depth, rail connections, but these are all things that we'll continue to work through and will be a huge priority for the port moving forward. When we look at creating jobs, it's great to start with one of the strengths of the port, which is marine trades. There's over 6,000 jobs in Whatcom County that are created or supported by marine trades. The picture here shows the aerated stabilization basin, which is will be support marine trades expansion and development. I think a lot of the leadership from this Port Commission's kept this property for the working waterfront, and as we move on to our next priority, environmental cleanup. The importance of environmental cleanup, you can see the wastewater treatment lagoon will need to go through a huge cleanup under the Department of Ecology before it can support those marine trades. So the environmental cleanup, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but not only is it good for restoring the health of the land and water, but really important for creating and supporting jobs. Ongoing development in the Waterfront District. This has been a big priority for the port since we acquired the property in 2005 to replace the 1,200 family wage jobs that were lost when Georgia Pacific shut down. We've made huge progress in 2021 with the expansion of the bike park, the start of the container village, the farmers market, activities like basketball, the grass lawn, Peter Paulson stage, restrooms, and more good things to come in 2022 with more containers, events like the Northwest Tune-Up that'll boost the economy, expanding the bike park for a kids zone, Harcourt's getting to work on the condos, getting the board mill out for an RFP, the affordable housing project, starting our district energy system. So lots of good things, as well as companies that are interested in the waterfront, like Silfab and All American Marine. So lots of good things to come in the waterfront, and that'll remain a priority for the port. So as we look at how we deal with all this stuff, the port's operating divisions, we have aviation, marinas, real estate, and marine terminals. And kind of a key point for the port's operating division is that they're designed to work towards cash neutral after operating costs, capital expense, and debt service. That varies from year to year, of course, with the challenges at the airport, but that's the way it's set up and structured in the budget, and a key message for the community. So that leaves the tax money we do take for public priorities, which are economic development, infrastructure, environmental cleanup, and parks and open space. And a key message point for this is, and you can see all the things, this is just a page in the brochure, from Blaine, the Jorgensen Pier, to Marine Park, the Marine Life Center, all the environmental cleanup, lots of public priorities that benefit the citizens of Whatcom County. A key message from the budget is that in 2021, the port received 1.96% of the property tax assessed on Whatcom County homeowners to support public priorities. So as we look at that, you can see this is about just under the 2.37% from the rural library district. So the port does a lot of great things in its public priorities, and the tax take is about $3.3 million less than the legal limit. So as we were kind of looking through the budget, there's a lot of ways the port supports the economy, and this was just kind of a fun play off the 12-man with the Seattle Seahawks, but you know, there's 12 here, there's probably a bunch more, but all these are worthy of discussion, and we're just giving a highlight, so I'll let you go through the brochure and whatnot, but just a few things to mention. Grants are a huge, the port being able to bring in as many grants as we do really benefits our economy, both state and federal grants into Whatcom County. During COVID, we secured over $12 million for Bellingham Airport. We helped Whatcom County and the city of Bellingham pass through over $4 million for business assistance, and over $600,000 in economic assistance grants passed through the port. For capital projects, this makes up the largest category of port spending. Projects like the Fisherman's Pavilion, which brings money into our economy for consultants, contractors, and results in many times in amenities for the community. When we look at those port capital projects over the next 5 years, we're estimating $147.6 million in capital projects. And what's interesting about this graph here, when I look at it, is if you look at the green on the bar graphs, that's all grant and other funding that's coming in. So the net port cost is $63.3 million, and grants is estimated at $84.3 million. So a huge amount of money coming in from external sources to benefit our economy. And if you look at the column on the right, environmental cleanup, because that's such a huge budget number, I thought it'd be worth talking a little bit about why that's so important for the port and for the economy. You can see the pictures on the left, some cleanup work on the downtown waterfront, and then, of course, the picture from last year with business and people coming down to the waterfront. So when we talk to our state legislatures to get the MOTCA grants, when we talk to all the folks, we always emphasize the importance of revitalizing our waterfront, creating jobs, returning this toxic property to productive use, reducing demand for undeveloped land. If you're going to build somewhere, this is exactly the right place to do. Increasing property value, stimulating private investment, generating local tax revenue, rebuilding our marine trades infrastructure. You look at the Whatcom Waterway cleanup, the phase 1, rebuilding that infrastructure really has helped businesses, the working waterfront businesses down on the C Street shoreline in our marine trades area, as well as also, restoring salmon habitat. So every dollar spent by the port is matched 1-for-1 by the state MOTCA grants, and every dollar invested is estimated to generate $6 in local tax revenue and $32 in business revenue. So, the port's leading efforts for 20 different state-listed sites in Bellingham and Blaine, and really important as we look to the future of our economy. Just a few others. Here's a port infrastructure, of course, key to working waterfront businesses. Here's a project we did last year, a multi-million-dollar replacement of a failing timber bulkhead in Blaine Harbor. You can see the before and after, and just how that benefits our marine trades businesses up in Blaine Harbor. And then transportation gateways. As I mentioned, we get $471.5 million in economic benefit per year from Bellingham International Airport alone. You talk about our marinas and the Bellingham Shipping Terminal and the Alaska Ferry and the Amtrak, huge benefit to the economy from local businesses, for tourism, for all those things. This picture shows the emergency ferry service that we did to Point Roberts, and this was just a, really important lifeline to Point Roberts for their folks, for their economy, and one of the reasons is just I really enjoy working at the port. So with that, that's just a quick overview of the budget highlights and strategic priorities that we have from the budget. Like I said, lots of more really good information in the full budget document, but thanks to Tamara for working with me on that project and kind of circling all the things that were important for our budget, and we'll continue to make this better and moving forward. So with that, any questions?
Commissioner Shepard, do you have any questions for Mr. Hogan?
No questions, but thanks for that. It really captures so many of the diverse projects we're working on. Really liked it.
Thanks, Commissioner.
Commissioner Bell.
It was an amazing presentation. Thank you for being concise. And did you actually say at the beginning of that you enjoyed going through the budget?
Did you
mean it, or?
I do. I've always appreciated that the port has been run with people that really know the budget and understand it, and take that as a priority first and foremost. So
you enjoyed. Those are the words.
He could send you a memo on that.
Yeah, sure. Anyway, this is amazing, and that presentation was amazing, and I will use this. So thank you very much.
Mr. Hogan, as usual, you do an excellent job here at the port, and you've outdone yourself once again. And we appreciate you being here, and thank you for what you do. It's good that we can give presentations like this so the public can go to YouTube and get online and understand, what's going on at the port. And it's these presentations like you just done that presents that to the people that own the Port of Bellingham, that live in Whatcom County here, so they understand what's being done with their money and their property. Thank you very much. And I believe you're up next, unless.
So for the next presentation, we are going to do the 2022 legislative update. And we're going to have Tom McBride and Ben Buchholz, the port's lobbyists down in Olympia, give an overview of the session. And just before we get going, though, I wanted to just briefly mention the passing of Senator Erickson, and I appreciate you giving a moment of silence when we started the meeting today. And I've had the pleasure of working with Senator Erickson for many years down in Olympia, and I really, really enjoyed his company. One of the things I really like working for the port is that we are nonpartisan for issues down in Olympia, and Doug sometimes tested the bounds of the nonpartisanship, but he always had the interests of the port in his heart, and brought millions and millions of dollars into Whatcom County, and he was always easy to get a hold of and always interested in what we were doing and understanding the issues. And, I considered him a friend, and my heart goes out to his family during this difficult time. So it's always hard to lose someone, and he'll be missed for sure by me, and I know a lot of other folks. So at any rate, I'll leave it at that, and we'll move on to, we're going to get an update of what's going on down in Olympia with Tom and Ben as soon as I can switch over on Zoom. And Ben, are you there?
Yep.
We're here. Can you hear us?
All right. Thanks. So again, Tom McBride and Ben Buchholz, and they're they've been working with us and the city of Bellingham and Whatcom County for a number of years, representing our joint legislative issues. And they've done terrific work, and we look forward to an update about the upcoming short session down in Olympia. Thanks, gentlemen.
Thanks, Mike. Board members, executive fix, port staff. My name is Tom McBride on behalf of McBride Public Affairs, here with Ben Buchholz to give you a briefing in preparation for the 2022 legislative session. And really appreciate the opportunity to visit with you, and both to the board and Mike, thanks for those comments as well for Senator Erickson and his unfortunate passing. We're so well served by the legislative delegations here in this area, and his passing will be a tremendous loss, both professionally and, more importantly, personally. We wanted to give you a few highlights. First, hitting on some general issues that I'll cover, and then I'll turn it over to Ben to cover some more specific port bills of interest. Just a reminder, this is the second year of a 2-year legislative session. So the bills from 2021 do survive through the actual, not just 2022 session, but the 2022 calendar year. So if there were to be a special session after the regular session, those bills would still be alive as well. We have Democratic control in the House with a 57-41 vote, in the Senate with a 28-21 vote, and of course the governor's mansion. So that's the same as last year, but there have been significant changes in the legislator makeup, particularly in the Senate, some of which we just talked about with Senator Erickson's passing. But Secretary of State Kim Wyman departed and was replaced by Senator Steve Hobbs from the 44th District. So Representative John Lovick stepped up to the Senate to take his place from the House. And in the 27th District, Senator Jeannie Darneal left and was replaced by sitting Senator now Trudeau. So those are a few changes, but it doesn't change the count of the majority control. In terms of what the session is going to look like, as you might imagine with Omicron, it is a bit of an evolving plan right now. Last year, as you'll recall, it was almost exclusively virtual. All the committee meetings were virtual. And that was the plan for this year too, for the committee meetings to remain virtual. But the plan was also to provide for primarily in-person floor session and public access in the galleries. That changed late last week in the Senate. So in the House will look a lot more like 2021. The floor session and the committee hearings will be done remotely. The Senate, there may have been information released during this meeting. In fact, we think there may be some news from the Senate in terms of how they're going to proceed in light of the House's decision and the Omicron changes. So we may know something as early as this evening. But I would anticipate the Senate may consider an approach similar to the House. And I do want to emphasize that the House did indicate that they will review how they will handle the session every 2 weeks. So they do anticipate that it could change going forward. But from the outset, they're going to be cautious and to protect the members and the public. Focusing on just some big issues that really dominated the headlines, so to speak, what we think will dominate the headlines during the 22 session. And some of those are a follow-up from the 2021 session. But
One of the first ones relates to the budget. The governor's budget was released in December, and we'll see the House and Senate budget proposals a little later in session, February most likely. And keep in mind, this session is only a 60-day session. So it starts on January 10, will end on or about March 10. So it's quick. It goes very quickly. So the governor's budget focused a lot on a few items that I'll highlight for you as we cover some of the big issues. But one of them is a focus on education in an effort to help address some of the kids' issues that they're dealing with in terms of social, emotional, and even academic needs. And you know, the governor has been able to rely on, as well as the legislature will as well, on a growth in state general fund revenue and an influx in federal dollars, as you know. And with respect to general fund state revenues, fiscal year 2020 revenues were up 6.2%. In fiscal year 2021, they were up 13.3%. So the economy is rebounding strong, as you know, and the revenues are coming along with it. You know, something we expect to be a big focus in 2022 will be police reform fixes. There were a number of big bills passed in 2021. The House Bill 1310, which dealt with use of force standards. They're going to come back, and we expect them to try to create a little more flexibility in the utilization of force by law enforcement in situations where they could diffuse dangerous situations. House Bill 1054 dealt with requirements for the use of tactics and equipment by law enforcement officers. And we think that then included a ban on chokeholds and neck restraints, but we think there will be some changes that relate to the probable cause requirements necessary to pursue suspects, for example. And there's been a lot of work done on the interim to try to find common ground in these areas. Another area that we can expect to see a lot of attention on, there's a significant interest to us, is a transportation revenue package. It's something that we've always supported, and we think there's some growing interest in it. It's going to be tough in a short session. And with the change in leadership in the Senate Transportation Committee, with Senator Steve Hobbs moving over to Secretary Wyman's office, we've got some new leadership to work through and find some common ground on between the House and the Senate. But that may be something we see happen this year. If not, it's going to be a good setup for activity in 23, I think. We'll also see work on issues like homelessness. The governor has proposed about $800 million for homeless and assistance with living situations in our state for those in need. We'll see some more work on climate. The big climate bill did pass, but they're going to have to come back and work on a few things related primarily to energy-intensive, trade-exposed companies. And we'll also see some proposals for clean transportation investment in the form of EV rebate programs, electrification of the state's ferry fleet, and even some solar energy grant proposals. And then finally, one that you're hearing a lot about is the Long-Term Care Act. That has taken effect. It is the law right now, but there has been a very clear message from the House, Senate, and even the governor's office that they will be coming back to work on some fixes to that bill. In fact, there has been a bill pre-filed which will extend the implementation date of that Long-Term Care Act about 18 months in terms of the collection of the payroll tax. And obviously it hasn't happened yet. It has to be passed by both chambers and signed by the governor, but I think there's some work to find common ground on that as well. So Ben, I'll turn it over to you for some more detail on specific bills of interest to the ports.
All right. Thank you, Tom. Appreciate that. Great update. I'm going to hit about 5 issues, five possible bills for session coming up. And the first one is MACA. The second one is MACA. The third one is MACA. No, I'm just kidding. But as Mike mentioned, MACA really is a high priority issue for the Port of Bellingham, obviously. And, you know, I can't remember how many years we've been on a part of the team with you guys, but every year MACA is the #1 priority. So basically, the current MACA law needs an administrative fix, but it looks like it might end up being a bill in the legislature to change some language that would allow the Department of Ecology to award funds to different projects that are not shovel ready. As of right now, there's I don't know if it was an oversight or an error, or if it was intentional. That's probably way above my pay grade, but basically there needs to be a fix where the Department of Ecology can award money to recipients that don't have 100% of their permits in hand, but are close. And so that is looking like, if it can be worked out with the Department of Ecology very soon, it will most likely be turned into a bill. And as Tom mentioned, this is sort of the, we want to preface all of these conversations with the fact that 2022 is such a short session. Things happen very rapidly. And some folks would say that during a short session, it's actually just sort of a warm up to the following long session. And so I don't want to make it sound like this is the absolute end, that if we don't get a fix now, we won't get one, or that it will pass or anything like that. I think the plan is to try to work it out with the Department of Ecology if there is a possible fix without legislation, but it's starting to look more like there will be a bill to fix the language. And it may not be a 2022 fix. It may end up being a 2023 fix. So that's going to be a high priority for us to monitor and to participate as part of the coalition. This is an important issue to anybody that could potentially be a recipient of MACA funds in the state. So it's not like we're going at this battle alone. There is a group around us that will be participating. The second issue that I think maybe more recently became a very high priority was flagged and sent to Tom and myself by Mike about the antitrust protections for smaller ports along in Washington and in Oregon. And I've had several conversations since Mike flagged this issue for us with folks that are going to be part of the coalition to try and find a solution with the Federal Maritime Commission. If there is not a solution that's able to be found, worked through with the Maritime Commission, then it is likely that in 2023 we would have to have a legislative fix so that those smaller ports have antitrust protection so that they can meet with other small ports on pricing and determining pricing and things like that. This is fairly, like I say, a fairly recent issue that's come up, and that's just part of how things go. You pick them up on the fly and do your homework and then try to find a fix for it. So thanks to Mike for catching that, and I'm sure there was some other folks on the team that caught that. But the conversations have started. Tom and I will be part of the coalition, part of the group that hopefully can work something out with the Federal Maritime Commission. If not, then we'll prepare for 2023 for a legislative fix to make sure that we have those antitrust protections in place. The third highest priority, these are all high priorities, so maybe I shouldn't number them. Another high priority is the 0.09 tax extension. Basically, it's referred to as the rural tax credit. And Whatcom County has outgrown the definition of the population of a rural county at this point. There was a bill last year. Let's see if my memory serves me right. I think it was House Bill 1333. It was introduced and sponsored by Representative Theringer, a very prominent Democrat House member. And he has given us his word that the plan is to run that bill again. It'll have a different, probably a different number, I'm thinking, but it may still be the same number. But it will include some amendments that were picked up in the Senate last session to include a small county in eastern Washington. And we will be there. There's a pretty large group coalition that has been working this bill, and those meetings will continue until session starts, and then we will have, I'm sure, regular check-in meetings with Representative Theringer to see where we can apply some light pressure to see if we can get that moved through the process. So we will keep giving you updates on all of these issues. That one especially we've gotten it into the Senate, and it has stalled in the Senate in the past. So I will leave that there. If you need more detail, we can talk about that offline. But basically, we're hoping this year, and if not this year, definitely in 2023. But we're going to continue working that with the group and with the coalition that has been built, and we're going to keep tweaking the talking points and the messaging like we always do to see if we can find a solution there.
Hey, Ben, a quick question.
Yeah,
Are we the only county that's in that situation where we've outgrown that?
No, there is one other. Benton County is in the same situation we are. And I can't remember if theirs is a population part of the definition or if it is for another reason. But Benton County and Whatcom County are in the exact same situation. And I would say there's about 12 to 15 folks in that coalition actively working that bill for session. So it's a pretty large group that's impacted.
The other issue, Commissioner, is extending the length of there's a sunset provision in the legislation, so everybody wants it to extend it for bonding purposes and it's a great program. It's how we help support All-American Marine and other projects, so.
Good point to make there, Mike. I appreciate that. Yeah, that's right. It's the termination point is trying to be extended for another. I think it's another 20 years or 25 years. So,
does that have any impact on broadband? I mean, is that outside the scope? Are we considered less rural for purposes of extending broadband to rural areas? I'm just wondering if that's a consideration or if I'm completely off base.
That's a great question. That hasn't really been part of our conversation on this specific bill. That could come into play on other items, and it may come into play on this one, but as of right now, it's more just the population definition and extending the deadline. The other issue I wanted to mention is the Community Economic Revitalization Board. You guys know it better as CURB. There are going to be some request legislation from CURB that would add anywhere between 50 million and 75 million from the operating budget for rural infrastructure of broadband for broadband implementation and expansion. So we have flagged this because broadband, frankly, has been a big issue, a high priority for all of the local governments around Bellingham for the last, I don't know, 10 or 15 years, and maybe even longer. And so that issue will be one that we continue to work on and monitor, and we will, be part of the coalition and work those request legislation bills from CURB. And the last one I wanted to mention, the Derelict Vessels Program and funding. It has become pretty clear that derelict vessels have always been and will probably be a problem going forward, and there's not enough funding to take care of all of those derelict vessel cleanups. The Marine Trade Association and Department of Natural Resources have a bill that they've been working on together. Basically would create additional funding to help clean up those derelict vessels. That's another bill that we want to flag for you. I don't think it's been pre-filed yet. As soon as it is, we will make sure that goes on the tracking list for all the bills that we watch and work on. But that was one I wanted to flag for you, just because derelict vessels has been a big part of the conversation over the last 10 years or longer, and so we want to make sure we don't miss any of that legislation from the department. And I guess I think I'll end there for right now. I'm sure there's dozens more issues that we could cover. You've seen our legislative report, and we try to keep the lumber companies in business when we print that thing sometimes. So it gets to be a little lengthy. But if there is ever a bill that you see on a list somewhere that you think we need to be tracking, you just send us an email or a text, and we'll make sure we follow that. I'm happy to take any questions at this point.
Commissioner Shepard, any questions?
Yeah, Ben, do you have a bill sponsor for that MACA legislation fix?
I do not. I will have to see, who exactly is going to sponsor that. And I don't know that it'll be pre-filed. It may be a first week drop. And so we'll have to get back to you on that.
Okay. All right. Keep us updated, and if there's anything we can do to help get local support or reach out to our delegation for helping to sponsor that, it's something important for us to get done, and it's impeding projects that we want to see happen.
Understood. The last thing I wanted to mention that I had written down here, but basically legislator meetings that we will be scheduling. Both of us mentioned how fast this session happens. The first cutoff is 25 days into the start of session. So that happens really fast. I mean, by the time you think about that, that's basically three business weeks. February 3rd. So plan on whoever wants to participate commissioner-wise and Rob and Mike, we'll try to get those scheduled before the cutoff. Sometimes there's an advantage to right before, and sometimes there's an advantage to right after. So it just depends on what the calendars look like for the legislators, but I wanted to give you a heads up on that.
Commissioner Bell.
Yeah, I've got mine is not related to the topics. Thanks for pushing these forward. But the first one is we are going to have somebody that is not Doug. And my question on a short session like this, how much behind the eight ball are we going to be by having somebody selected a week from now, starting after the session starts, with getting somebody up to speed, getting them on committees, putting them in the right location? I mean, personally, I think our council was derelict in their duties by not appointing somebody today so they could be in place in time for the session to open. But that being said, how far behind is this person going to be when they get there 2 weeks from now?
Ben, I can take this. It's not unusual for these kinds of replacements to occur immediately prior to session or even during session. It's not ideal, certainly. But you're right, Commissioner. I mean, it does put us at a disadvantage, and we need to work quickly with that member once identified to quickly bring him or her up to speed. So we can, we'll know, and we can act immediately upon the appointment being finalized and do our best to bring that person up to speed. They're going to be from the area, of course, potentially even having been familiar with issues from prior work. So we can build on that as well. Not knowing exactly who it is, it's hard to talk in specifics, but we can do some quick work, and it might be ideal to bring in you all for some preliminary meetings and to bring them up to speed more quickly than ever.
Yeah, okay. And the next question, thank you for that. And maybe that's something we can do in advance, is talk to some of them before they get down there. You said the revenues were up last year 13% and up 6% the year before. Those revenues, are they all generated from Washington state tax? How much of that was federal input versus how much was generated by the economy in Washington state? Do you have a breakdown of that?
Well, the numbers I gave you were general fund revenue, Washington State General Fund revenue numbers. So they were all in-state figures.
So we had a good year economically last year.
Yeah.
Commerce was good.
Yeah. And remember, right after COVID hit, some of those revenue projections, understandably, not knowing what was going to happen, were pretty depressed. And so the delta between where we thought we might be and where we ended up is pretty significant. And every time those revenue figures go up, the projections go up with it. So not as much as 13% in the out years, but it does adjust each biennium going forward as far as they project. So there's no need to sugarcoat it. It is good news.
Yeah, and majority of that real estate revenue in property taxes, and how much of that was retail sales? And again, not to be specific, but just give me some general ideas. I would assume that was the majority of the increase.
Real estate was way above what they had projected. Nobody could have projected what was about to happen during the pandemic with real estate in Washington. And the figures that they had estimated were well below where they ended up hitting for real estate transactions. I don't know as well on the property tax where that ended up, but real estate was a big chunk of what was above the mark.
Any particular business segment that was in the negative that did not increase in 2020-21?
Well, I would say conventions were way down. That was an industry that was hit really hard.
So hospitality?
Yeah.
Hospitality, anything to do with travel or group settings, you can insert XYZ. So they were hit the hardest, but those were some of the worst hit industries.
And because of the COVID impact, but then also, the labor shortages in the service sector have been so dramatic.
I guess the next thing is with the push towards electric and solar funding headed down the pike, what is the outlook for our electric grid to handle the increase in demand? Is there anything out there that's looking forward towards that infrastructure rebuild or enhancement?
Well, I was on a call with some of the governor's policy folks talking about the proposed investment, and a lot of the investment. I'm not sure this is exactly addressing your question, so tell me if I'm off mark here. But one of the main objectives they've got in their proposed investment is to make sure all communities are receiving the investment, so that you've got a network that can serve the entire state, whether not just the urban areas and the interstate corridors, but also the rural areas and underserved areas. Now, I know that there is a lot of work being done with the utilities to coordinate in the rollout of some of those investments. But I think, Commissioner, you may also be talking a little bit about maybe just the enhancement of the existing system, not just adding to it. And I can't speak to that specifically. I don't know, Ben, if you know that, but I'd be surprised if there isn't work being done to enhance the system statewide.
Yeah, just to add to what Tom said, I don't have specific numbers, but last session there was a work session held in several different committees that have a little piece of. I know the Environment Committee held a work session both in the House and the Senate. I know the Senate, a couple different committees there had work sessions on, and like I say, I don't have a ton of specifics, but basically work sessions talking to the utilities and listening to where the grid is right now and where the grid needs to be even in 5 years and 10 years and 15 and 25 years down the road, and where the investments need to go, how much it would cost, what that looks like in terms of rates, et cetera. And so those work sessions, like I say, I attended those this past session in 21, but they've been going on for a couple years before. So I would say over the last 3 to 4 years, those work sessions have been happening more often, in greater number, and more people starting to pay attention.
That's really what I wanted to hear. With the increase in demand, I can see the demand on the electrical grid is going to be tremendous down the road, and just hoping we've got plans in place for that. Other than that, thanks for all of this. I'll want to weigh in on all of them, so we'll see you in Olympia.
Good, thank you.
Gentlemen, I have a question, and since the marine area is my area. The DNR bill we're looking at for these derelict vessels, with what they came out last time, really hampered us in our auction of vessels. They painted a pretty wide brush when they used a year as a classification of whether a vessel is a derelict vessel or it's a saleable vessel. So they went with an age class, which is a year, and you've got vessels that, particularly fiberglass vessels, that seem to get stronger with age. They don't seem to get weaker. So it's hampered us in the ability to get rid of vessels. We have a couple vessels currently that there's people that would like to buy from us at an auction. We can't get rid of them. And we're gonna have to spend needlessly DNR money or our money to destroy them. So what they've done previously didn't work very well, and I'm hoping they're addressing some of that. And it's obvious to me with what they did that the folks that are addressing this really don't have a handle on what a derelict vessel is. So when this new bill that you're speaking of comes out, could you email me that as soon as it comes out so that I can give you some input back, because and I can have help from the folks here in our marinas and that, but they're really off course on some of this stuff, and it's going to cost them a lot more money in the long run to get rid of the vessels when there's a bunch that we could sell and recoup some of our mortgage rates, and so to speak, and they wouldn't have to put as much funding in to get rid of vessels that are very good vessels that can be repaired. So I'd appreciate it if either one of you would get that either to Carrie or Rob, or straight to me is fine too, whatever. But I'd really like to look at that piece of legislation before it goes down the road, because they've made some serious mistakes in their past stuff, and the recent past stuff they did that really handcuffed our harbor masters in the ability to recoup their mortgage funds in these vessels that are over, and as well as get rid of them in the manner that doesn't cost the public a lot of money. So with that, everything else is a great presentation. It's good to see you guys. Happy New Year, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, before we move on to, well, I guess we've got to close. We're going to recess the public session of the open meeting, and oh, wait a minute. Yeah, we got to recess the open.
We need to open a public hearing on the comprehensive scheme.
Okay, we're going to.
Or I'm sorry, on the redistricting plan. I misspoke. It's the redistricting.
Okay, we're gonna recess the public meeting and open the public hearing on the Port's draft redistricting plan, and that's going to be presented by Greg McHenry.
Good evening, Commissioners. Greg McHenry, Senior Planning Analyst for the Port of Bellingham. I've requested to share my screen. Can you see that?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so you may recall from the meeting last month in December, the Commission approved the publication of the draft districting plan, which basically describes bringing in precinct 234 and the entirety of precinct 136 into District 1 from District 2's and 3's respectively. And the purpose of the public hearing today is to solicit public comment on the draft districting plan. And I'm not sure if anybody signed up for the public hearing.
There's no one signed
Or
up in the
not.
Harbor Center here. Is there anyone online that would like to speak to the redistricting plan? Please unmute yourself and speak up.
Hearing and seeing none, I'll turn it back to the commissioners in case they have any questions.
Commissioner Bell, do you have any questions for Mr. McHenry?
Yeah, I think just for the public certification, can you describe how the map was derived in the joint committee that, with us and the PUD that brought this about?
You bet. Every 10 years with the new census, we're required to balance the district based on population. And with those numbers, trying to be balanced between the different districts, it results in these district boundary changes. Currently, as drafted, there's a deviation of 113 persons between Districts 1 and District 3, and they are in balance between District 2 and District 1.
I was more interested in the process, like, so you did this jointly with the PUD so that we both had the same lines, correct?
That is correct.
And how was that a commission that you established, or was it again, I'm just trying to be transparent.
This was staff work, sir. So it was all staff work. We worked with the staff at the PUD, and then they presented it to their commissioners for approval. I believe their commissioners have already approved it because they had to adopt it by year's end. Because they have an election next year, you have a little more time because you don't have an election next year. But staff worked together on this, like Greg said, to make sure the populations were substantially equal, and then they present the work to the commissions.
Yeah, I just wanted that to be out in the public domain. Thank you.
Commissioner Shepard.
I don't have any new comments other than what I said at the last meeting, that the PUD members that I spoke with wanted to convey their appreciation to Greg and his effort and his work with them. So thank you. Good job.
And
Thank you.
I'm the same, my comments at the last presentation, and questions were answered. And thank you for working on this, Greg, as well as staff. It's a great job. So,
no problem. And we will, at the next commission meeting, have a resolution for your consideration to take action on the 18th.
thank you, Greg.
You bet.
Anything else on this?
No,
That
just
being said, we're going to close the public hearing on the Port's draft redistricting plan and reopen the public meeting. And with that, we have Greg.
you want to take a small recess and then call for public comment first?
Okay. Okay, we're going to take a small recess, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes? 5 minutes, and then we'll reconvene the meeting.
Back here at 5:30.
5:30. Is on the official screen here. To reopen the January 4th public meeting, Port Commission Bellingham. And we're going to start with public testimony. We have folks present, I think 2 folks present, so either one of you want to give testimony? Okay, just remember to state your name and address, please.
Yeah. Sorry about that. My name's Doug Carlberg. I live in Bellingham. I'm one of those odd people. I didn't realize you were doing the strategic budget tonight, but I'm one of those odd people that for some reason I give thought to how to make this community better and how to get this port to function. In function, I don't mean just having a meeting. I mean actually taking actions that will move the needle on the economy in Whatcom County. So I want to take a minute and throw some ideas out there that I think are big ideas that probably don't make it into the packet, not to detract from what staff has done. But let me give you a few ideas that I think will really make a difference in the economy of Whatcom County. The first of which is, do we need a border? Now, I spent a lot of time in Point Roberts, and I watched those people go through misery for almost 2 years now. And my question was, why do we need a border there? Now, that seems like a little bit of a bizarre idea, like a crackpot would come up with it, until you realize that France and Germany no longer have a border. Neither does England and France. So the idea of not having a border, I think, should be within the bailiwick of the port to think about what effect would that have on Whatcom County's economy. Because I think it'd have a positive one, particularly in Point Roberts. There's just really not a reason for it that I can see. Second of all, it's kind of a technical thing. The United States is going through a very unique time. And as an economic issue, we have never in the history of this country ever printed this much money. Now, I got a little pirate in me, and the question is, how do we manage that? How do we take advantage of that? How do we look ahead and not get lambasted by it, maybe is one of the things. So I pulled up a little chart on my phone, and there's the money supply since 1943, and there's something that happens every single time that there's a major increase in the money supply. Inflation goes to almost exactly the amount of increase in money supply. Now, Milton Friedman, who got a Nobel Peace Prize for observing this exact same thing. But folks, the money supply went up 25%. Now, there's always a delay after the money supply goes up. Then inflation follows it. Every year, every time. I can show you the chart. It's perfect. So the question is, what does the port do? What if we have 25% inflation in a year and a half? That's a devastating thing for a local economy. For those of us that are old enough that remember the 70s, let me tell you, sometimes being old helps everybody else in preparing for what's coming at them. And one of the things I think the port should take a really hard look at, because when that happens, lenders take a beating. That's what happens. And I think the port should take a hard look at if they've got capital projects to go ahead and borrow the money now. That's the strategy. Two other things that I think make a big difference for the economy of Whatcom County. Long term, it's hard to take education in engineering and VOTEC, which used to be part of our high school system. We've talked about it. Everybody agrees that it should be returned, but nobody's doing anything. And I think that would have a huge impact economically to have really well-educated young people entering our economy in Whatcom County. I think employers will chase that. I think it will raise their wages. It'll raise their standard of living. Those are all economic things, and I don't think the port can do it alone, but somebody needs to get the ball rolling. The fourth one that I think will make a huge economic difference is the best jobs in the United States are always manufacturing. It's just the way it is. We can chase hospitality, we can chase retail. Those are not great wages. We have an incredible problem with affordability in housing in Whatcom County. It's not being addressed. It's been a crisis for 20 years. And after 20 years, somebody's got to reflect on the fact that what you're doing is not working. We can put the blame anywhere we want to, but the bottom line is in the United States of America today, the best jobs, the manufacturing jobs, are chasing affordable housing, and we don't have it. And if we solve that problem, we will get good jobs, good employers. But at the end of the day, it really kind of boils down to one thing that I think is really important and it doesn't show up anywhere. How important is it for kids to have grandparents that are part of their lives? Because when your kids can't get jobs where they were raised, that's what you lose. Thank you.
Doug, excuse me, I have a question. When you said about reinstating the education, what two fields was it? It was engineering and?
You know, it's basically engineering. What happened in the United States was we gave up making things. That's just the fundamental thing. And everybody kind of stood by and said, well, it's okay, or it's not that big a deal. But I think through this pandemic, we've realized making things matters. And I'll tell you something else that's a trend that's already underway, and that is the only way you can afford to make things overseas is if you have cheap transportation, if you have cheap fuel, cheap fossil fuels. So, you know, the whole global warming debate, the bottom line is you want to use less fuel. One of the ways to use less fuel is to produce things domestically. We're learning that. And so the question is, how, as policymakers, do we affect that locally? And I think one of the great ways to do that is to promote an environment where we educate young kids into how to build things. It just seems kind of fundamental, I guess, to me, but I think that there's no reason we can't do that, but we have to prioritize it, which that's where it comes back to folks like you, where somebody stands up and says, you know what, we may not do it all, but we're going to put together some people. We're going to say economically, we think it's important that our kids get a great education here, which includes how to make things, and they have the opportunity to stay and live here with their parents and their families. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Anyone else?
Milan Slipčević, president of Commercial Fishermen Association, just have a chance now to congratulate two re-elected commissioners, Ken Bell and Michael Shepard, to be re-elected, and feel so good as a leader of Commercial Fishermen Association to have one of the best commission ever. I mean, including Bobby Briscoe. And poor staff that we are happy with. And not much to say. We have a new building that's called Fisherman's Pavilion that we still try to get to the point which way we're going to manage. It's something new that we have to deal with. We have so many promises from our executive director, Rob Fix, which way we can do, which not. Now end up, we have to kind of shuffle the cards, see which way we can do. Just because of the good relationship and trust of our commission and port staff, we feel confident that we can solve the problem in favor of all of us. And just thank you for everything we do together for better of our community. And we don't care how much we can sacrifice of own time and own thing to get something better that we all can benefit for. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Anyone else have anything? And we got anybody in the outwings?
Anyone online want to comment? Go ahead and unmute yourself. Doesn't look like it, Commissioner.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, we're going to move on to action items. Carrie, if you please.
Sure. Motion to select a commissioner to serve on the Port of Bellingham Economic Development Administration Revolving Loan Fund Committee. That's John.
John, you still out there?
Sure am. Yes, good evening again, Commissioners. John Mitchner, Port of Bellingham Economic Development Department. We are basically going back and sort of restarting this committee with coming out of COVID and having an opportunity to make a fresh start of things, realizing with the loan that we just approved today that we are going to be getting more interest here. In the loan committee makeup, the EDA recommends we have an elected official on the committee. It's been some time since we have done that. And so today would be having one of you commissioners be appointed to the committee. It meets as needed. Roughly, it's been once a year over the time we've been managing this program. It's been a couple of years since we actually have met due to COVID, but generally it's once a year. And then if at any point in time we are working with a borrower that potentially might need a workout or some additional help with paying back their loan, we'll then get the commission again, or excuse me, the loan committee together again to weigh in on that and give direction forward. So it's not a large commitment, but it's a great role and it's a great way to be involved with the business folks here in the community. And I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone might have.
Well, I have a question. When you say it's a big commitment, can you tell us, John, is that in time or in thought?
No, Commissioner, actually, it's not a big commitment, excuse me. It's relatively not. As I say, maybe once, twice a year, the committee will meet for maybe a half an hour or so, we get the loan decisions made. And then if something were to come up, most of everything else we can handle through email, especially these days with COVID. We've done other loan committee decisions through email. But when we get an actual loan application to review, we did give people the option to do that in person or online. And that took about an hour. So it's really not a very large commitment, no.
And you're going to need about 30 to 60 minutes to prepare for that meeting, reviewing the loan materials and the applicant's information to get ready. So you've got an hour meeting maybe twice a year, and then you've got a half hour preparation for each of those meetings.
Okay. So gentlemen.
Has there been a precedent as to who typically goes on that?
No, we've never had a commissioner on it.
I've been on there before,
so maybe we can establish a precedent. I think, really the president of the commission should probably be the default member of that committee.
So have you noticed that I'm not the penny pincher, and if Tam was sitting here, she'd probably say, you're not the best financial guy, and I think you might be the better financial guy and penny pincher than me, and Rob's shaking his head over there. So,
I'm just amused by the conversation.
And Michael,
if I may also weigh in real
went
quickly,
somewhere we can't see him anymore. So, so I guess, and I apologize tonight. I got a little bit of ineptness. I'm trying to get back in the swing of things here, and I keep forgetting to put the glasses on to read what I'm looking at, so it's a blur. But we've got a motion before us to select a commissioner for the EDI loan program, correct, John?
It's not the EDI program, but sorry, it's the Revolving loan fund program.
Revolving loan fund program, because that doesn't say that there. So I think that we need to decide amongst us who would like to do it, and I'll be straightforward with you. I really don't want to do it. Not that I'm uncomfortable and couldn't do it, I really would rather that one of you gentlemen did it if you were so inclined. So I think Commissioner Shepherd and Commissioner Bell, the conversation is probably between you two and what you'd like to do, because I would like to opt out of this one.
You've already broken protocol. Michael, you want to do this?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I've been interested in this program, and I'd be happy to fill in for the role.
And if I may also add to that, part of the EDA requirements are that when any loan decisions are made, we are required to have a banker present, and we do have 3 bankers on the committee now, along with Executive Fix's financial expertise. So from that regard, we're well served. We also have 2 accountants, and then a workforce development representative, and then a small business representative as well.
So I would have to ask the question, though, is Commissioner Bell, were you interested in this as well?
I'd like to nominate Commissioner Shepherd to take on this role, because me spending any more time with bankers and accountants is not on my long-range plans.
Well, I'm going to second that. So what's that?
Okay, Michael.
Any further questions or discussions on this before we take a vote?
Nope.
No.
Okay. So, Carrie, would you please?
Motion to select a commissioner to serve on the Port of Bellingham Economic Development Administrative Revolving Loan Fund Committee.
And just replace a commissioner with Commissioner Shepherd.
Oh, sorry. Motion to select Commissioner Shepherd to serve on the Port of Bellingham Economic Development Administrative Revolving Loan Fund Committee.
Commissioner Bell?
Yes.
Commissioner Shepherd?
Yes.
Commissioner Briscoe's a yes. I would have thought Commissioner Shepherd would have muted.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on to action item 2. Carrie, if you please.
Motion by the Port Commission to approve a modification to Point Roberts Press, Inc., Harbor Land Lease in Blaine Harbor.
Thank you, Carrie. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Terry Elahi, Property Manager. Point Roberts Press have been a port tenant in Blaine since 1996. In 2005, they constructed the current building and entered into a new lease. Since then, they've had a tremendous amount of difficulty leasing the building and have come to the port to request a change of use to add residential uses in 30% of the building. The 30% is based on the square feet of the building, and it'll only be up on the upper floors, not on the first floor. The remainder of the building would remain a mixed-use commercial retail with the potential of a restaurant added as well. If the Commission were to approve this change, the expansion of the building, the second phase, would also fall into the same category. 30% of that would be allowed as residential uses. I'd be happy to answer any questions. One part of this, sorry. In this document, it does provide an indemnification and a release to the port from the tenant, Point Roberts Press, and their subtenants or residential unit tenants that would release the port for the use of having a residential uses next to commercial marine uses, also known as a no whiner clause.
It's okay, I couldn't remember that either. You're good.
Okay. I'm happy to answer any questions the Commission may have.
Commissioner Shepherd.
I don't necessarily have any questions, but I do think that the initial terms of this deal that were initially set still have merit and still pertain today. And I have concerns over the loss of economic potential for commercial use and other uses at that site if we do move to residential. And so those concerns continue for me, and I don't have any further questions.
Commissioner Bell. Just questions for Terry, I believe.
I have no questions for Terry.
At this point, I have no questions for Terry either, but I think we need to have a bit of discussion about this before we vote. So I guess I'll get the ball rolling. I guess Commissioner Shepherd actually started a little bit there and stated things, but when I was voted in by the people of Whatcom County and basically entrusted me with their public properties and the management of it to help my fellow commissioners manage that property, it became a pretty serious thing to me. And I've been a commercial fisherman my entire life. Not too far out of high school, I started making trips to Olympia to try and fight for our way of life and fight for our waterfront, and then to hang on to things and hang on to our industry. Still to this day, I'm still fighting and helping, hanging on. Probably will be till I can't do it any longer. So it doesn't, things around the waterfront do not, and what's going to go on the waterfront don't come lightly to me. Been around a long time. My own business for 45 years in the waterfront. I've seen a lot of things come and go. I've seen a lot of businesses come and go, people come and go. I've seen a way of life basically come and go and then come back again, which is where we're at now. But I swore an oath to take care of the port property. And in our mandates from the government, people higher up, they handed out these mandates to take care of this property to ensure a good economy for Whatcom County and amongst other things. I'm not comfortable with starting the gentrification of our waterfront with residents. I don't believe residences belong in our working waterfront areas. The Port of Bellingham does not have enough commercial property. We're outgrowing what we have rapidly. Everybody wants some of it. Everybody. There was a lease signed for this property originally, stipulated what could happen there and what couldn't happen there. And that still stands today. And I think when my commissioners, first the fellow commissioners that are not here with us today, the commissions before us, put those leases in place, I think that they must have thought the same way that I did, that the gentrification of our waterfront, and I understand there's people that don't believe this would do that, but believe me, I've seen it happen. Once the door is cracked, it gets pushed open further and further and further. And that's not what I've been entrusted to do with our public port property. And I've looked at the plans that were brought forward. I reconsidered at the first on bringing of this change of a lease. I think it was 1.5 years, 2 years ago, somewhere in there. I had to go through the same tussles in my mind as, what's right, what's wrong. It's a decision that comes to me very hard because I understand people are trying to better themselves and a better way of life and maybe do things that are better. But on the other hand, is that offset what I'm supposed to do as a port commissioner with the lands that have been entrusted to me? And I believe that we're not supposed to build residences on our waterfront, on port property. So that being said, that's where I stand. We have a lease that's in place, and I think it's there for a reason. And it was signed by the people that are there now. So, Commissioner Bell?
I was trying to get Michael to talk first.
He already spoke a little bit.
So, Mr. Grubb, you have a project that I believe was going to start something on the waterfront. Let me say that differently. I have been anxious to see the betterment of the Blaine Harbor and an upgrade to that building and to structures along that waterfront. And I believe that in the next 4 years, we have an obligation as a port to make sure that we invest in enhancing that road, those buildings, and that place. I believe that you had a proposal that at first excited me because I saw people willing to put investment into a building that had languished for a number of years. And there's no doubt that that's actually probably an understatement. I believe that that building has potential. I believe that you brought a project to the table that would have brought significant investment into that structure and would have brought an enhancement. I don't necessarily share, to the extent that Commissioner Briscoe does, the danger created by especially workforce housing along a waterfront. I do believe, however, in the integrity of a contract and in the integrity of doing what you signed up to do. You clearly signed a lease that had a restriction on it, and that restriction was a signature by both parties. In business, that's what happens. You're not allowed to change the terms of that lease on the way out the door because you want to sell the property. So from just an integrity standpoint, we have a signed lease on your building that restricts the use to residential property. I believe we as a port have an obligation to abide by the leases we sign, just like I believe you have an obligation to live by the leases that you sign. For that reason, I believe that this project should not go forward. I do want to say categorically that we as the port have an obligation to improve that area, to put an investment in that area, to enhance the Blaine Harbor at a time when I think it's ripe for growth. And I think we have an obligation to do it in a manner we choose and not necessarily the zoning from the city of Blaine contemplates. It is still our property. We still own it. We still have the rights to sign lease and put restrictions in those leases, just like any other property owner. And unfortunately for you, Mr. Grubb, you did sign a long-term lease with a restriction that you would now like to get out of. I'm not in favor of that. So for that reason, I'm going to speak against going forward with this.
Commissioner Shepherd, do you have anything to add to the conversation?
Yeah, I'd just like to communicate that this is a decision that we have really wrestled with. And I want to thank my fellow commissioners and staff for the amount of time and thought that they've all put into this. We haven't taken this lightly, and I think we've tried to look at this concept from every possible angle to make sure that we are thinking it through thoroughly. We've solicited public testimony and statements from organizations and individuals, and dealt with this topic multiple times over the past year, and really thought through it at length. And Mr. Grubb, I'm sure this is not the resolution that you were hoping for, but it is one that we've taken a lot of time to come to, and puts forward what I feel is our mission, our principal mission around economic development and job creation. And we will continue to work with you in any way we can to be creative and think through opportunities for our staff to connect with you on this. But I do share the sentiment that my concerns over gentrification are too great to support this.
Is that all you have, Commissioner Shepherd?
That's it. Thank you.
Commissioner Bill?
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate, Mr. Grubb, this is not something we took lightly. We've met on this many times, and the emotional the emotional toll it's taken on us as a commission has been incredible. So just know that this was not a decision that was made lightly by this commission, but I think you are seeing that we are a unified commission as we have been the last couple of years, and we will continue to be that. We do believe that you had an obligation to, if you wanted a lease improvement on that property, to bring it to the port long before you decided to sell the building, and not when you decided to sell the building. So with that being said, I'm ready for the vote.
I would also add, Mr. Grubb, that as my fellow commissioners have said, this was a tussle. We've spent quite a bit of time in executive session, more than once, talking about this proposal, and we wrestled with it the first time, and this time was even more of a wrestle. So this is not something, a decision that comes to us lightly, and I know it's not going to be the decision, I don't believe. We haven't voted yet, but I don't believe that you're probably going to want to hear. But that being said, Carrie, if you please.
Motion by the Port Commission to approve a modification to Point Roberts Press, Inc. Harbor Land Lease in Blaine Harbor.
Commissioner Shepherd.
I'm a no.
Commissioner Bell.
No.
Commissioner Briscoe's a no. Okay, that being said, we're moving on to other business. Commissioner Shepherd.
Yeah, I just wanted to get an update on from Rob on some of the severe weather impacts. I know we had quite a number of impacts that have affected our properties. Could you give a quick update for us?
We're going to put a very comprehensive report to you and have it out to you by the end of the week on everything, but I'll give you some of the highlights. And most of the damage was cold weather damage and frozen pipes. So we did relatively well in the snow. The airport was closed the day after Christmas. The runway was closed until about 11 o'clock. All the airlines canceled all their flights that day, however, so no flights went out on December 26th. But during that time, our heating systems just were not keeping up, as many commercial buildings in Whatcom County experienced this. And we saw broken pipes at the cruise terminal. We saw broken pipes at Warehouse 4 over by the cruise terminal where the Coast Guard keeps some of their gear. We saw broken pipes at the airport and some other port facilities that are smaller scale. But again, overriding damage to port property was broken pipes, and most of that damage from a monetary perspective came at the airport. We have instituted an insurance claim, and our insurance company has helped us with some restoration companies that have been out at our airport trying to clean it up. So airport is back up and running. The damage is still there. I don't think Halibut Henry's sustained the most of that damage at the airport, and I don't believe they're back up and running yet. But the work is going on to repair the facilities and get the insurance claim in. And again, we'll have a detailed report to you by the end of the week of all the damage.
Okay, thanks. How did the pump track fare? I know we had some previous damage from the last round of storms to the new jump lines.
Yeah, and those weren't repaired yet. We've got to do a little better drainage system on those jump lines. As we experienced with the regular body of the pump track, it takes some while to bed it in, and once it gets bedded in, it drains much better. But the frozen part of it, thank you to the public, they stayed off of it, and so we didn't see much damage there. I went over there today. There's some damage, but it's nothing material. This stuff that the volunteers can get at and fix.
How long do you think until we can get those jump lines open again?
Yeah, it's really going to be weather dependent. I don't want to commit to a date because of the weather, but we're hoping, and this is, again, weather dependent, but we're hoping to have those advanced jump lines and some new businesses down there by the early April.
All right. Okay. I wanted to just give a thanks to Doug Carlberg for all your time and your comments. Certainly appreciate it. And to encourage staff to make sure that we get a resolution on the terms for the commercial, for the Fisherman's Pavilion, so we can get that behind us and make sure that building is getting used. If there's anything staff needs from the commission, please reach out. That's it for me.
Commissioner Bell.
I too want to say thanks, Doug, for your comments. I believe, as you do, that value added is where economies grow, and manufacturing and engineering and making things happen is truly much better than a service economy. So your comments were not lost on all of us. There's absolutely nothing I can do about erasing the line at the border, but it's a great thought. Wondering how many scotches you had before you came up with that one, but clearly you're a thinking man. I do want to say Happy New Year. It's good to be back. It's good to be here with all of you. Looking forward to a great 2022.
Thank you, Commissioner Bell. Couple of things. So if maybe, I don't know where we've left off with restarting our education programs. We were talking with the unions. I mean, then the pandemic came along. It seems like we've kind of dropped everything, and I certainly think we need to get back into talking with the outside education thing, that we can maybe give it a kick, a boot start. I know the Working Waterfront Coalition has been working on their stuff, but I'm kind of thinking that we got to get this going again. I mean, and I understand why I got stopped, but we need to get it going again. As well as, you know, at one point in time, before the pandemic, we were reaching out to the agricultural people in the county. We were having some serious talks and trying to get something going there with how we could help, what we could do as a port. And I think we need to get back into that. That's been dropped as well. And by no one's fault. It's everybody's been trying to make things work through the pandemic, and it's been difficult. I'm really proud of our staff here. I think we're one of the government agencies in the county that really didn't drop a lot of balls. We kept everything bouncing and moving along as best we could, and as we were allowed to by government agencies higher up than us. So those are two things I'd like to see if we can't get a bit of a report on, or however on that.
And I'd like to comment just a little bit on the farming. I mean, that really is my district. So if you would like, I would like to maybe organize a group of the farmers in the district. I know most of them fairly well.
Absolutely, and then probably a good contact point that I've contacted has been Ben Ellenbox. He's a good point to who to go to guy for that.
And so is Brad Rader and Mayberry. I mean, all of those guys would be more than willing to sit down at least on a periodic basis and just discuss what we can do for them.
And we want to make sure we reach out to the farm group, not just the Raider and those guys, but we got to bring in the little guys as well, so to speak.
Yeah, Dylan Honcoop, who's in charge of that. I think if we could get that together, I would be more than willing to spearhead that.
And I want to point out that, you know, BP's, I'm sure all of you get their emails as well as I do, and they've reached out. And what they're doing in the new energy fields and trying to move forward is exactly what I beat the drum about 3 years ago when everybody wanted them out of this county and shut them down. People need to understand that companies like that are going to be the leaders into the new energy fields, into the future. And they need to embrace those guys instead of try and push them away. And Whatcom County could be a leader in that area with those people here. So I think if we can lose some of the emotion, so to speak, when we're trying to make decisions on who to work with and who to talk to and where people stand on things, and start using more factual based approaches, I think we're going to get a lot further, a lot faster, because this country's running on nothing but emotion right now, and a lot of it's not very good emotion. And I would ask everyone for a New Year's start out, or a resolution, or whatever you want to call it. Start coming to the tables around the nation and around the world with less emotion, more facts, and common sense, and the ability to sit down and work problems out instead of build walls. That's where we need to go in this country and in our world. And that's the only way we're going to make things better for everybody. With that, Happy New Year. And do we have anything else, gentlemen? We're adjourned. Oh, excuse me. We have a public.
I hope that resolution lasts longer than my resolution to lose weight. That didn't even make it till Monday.
Public comment at this time?
Sorry, guys, I just forgot earlier to say our snow weather show up on a Christmas Eve, and we end up with so many snow in a community and in a Squalican Harbor. And as a commercial fisherman's leader, I end up with a few phone calls how our guys can load the gear going crabbing down coast because can run the forklifts. Then I called our fairly new harbor master and asked him how we can solve the problem. Half hour later, I have a couple of phone calls from our guys that's our guys already cleaning the harbor and moving the snow and make our guys get to the point. That means compliment for our fairly new harbor master. That's
Yeah, our harbor master, our harbor crew, and especially our maintenance crew just rocked this snowstorm. They were incredible. They got out the day after Christmas on a Sunday. They had the runway open by noon in one of the biggest snowfalls we've ever had. I mean, our maintenance team and our marinas team, you just can't say enough good stuff about them. Incredible work.
Yeah, snow show up just in between Christmas and New Year. I mean, where we all celebrating and end up busy in other way. And still, harbor master is not on a job. He answered the phone. Half hour later, we have our service cleaning the harbor and moving the things, and our guys can load the gear. I mean, that is something that we very see something positive that deserve compliments. Thank you.
Thank you. No, it's what we've spoken to several times here at the commission bench, so to speak, that our staff, we have some particular staff that are really outstanding at what they do. And that sets a good example for the rest of our staff. And we see everybody falling into line and going the extra, not mile, but just going the extra to get something done. And it's very good to see. It's something we don't see a lot of in this country anymore. Usually it's punch in and punch out, and that's it. But when you got people taking their time on a holiday weekend to come and get the job done, it's pretty impressive, and I appreciate that. Thank you. Anything else from anyone? We're adjourned.